Welcome back to Track Talk. We're going to be doing a game of 1870, and we'll just jump right into the auction. We have Grady leading us off, and he goes for the Mississippi Bridge Company. Always a fun private, kind of has a lot of map control, can decide whether or not you actually want to use it, depending on where you are in floating a company. So, for instance, let's say everybody floats ahead of you, and you decide not to float on the Mississippi River, could make their lives miserable by leaving the map cut in half. So some power there depending on how operating or priority works out in the first stock round. Blevins, he is going for the Katy. Billy going for Gulf Shipping. Pretty nice synergy with the GMO. A little bit predictable if he goes with that, so maybe players will be expecting to play around that. And we're rounded out with Boyd, who will be going also on the Katy, so first contested auction. Grady, he goes for the Frisco. Blevins, Southern Cattle. So we now have a situation where it would be pretty easy to pull on the Great River Shipping and get some of these privates for very cheap. Billy, were he to do that, would end up with Gulf and Great River. So pretty good private for buy-in and also decent revenue. He would be giving Grady the Frisco and the bridge. Um, I think that probably is not wise. Grady should have no trouble defending the Frisco. It's not like somebody would be able to steal it from him. Um, and he would be able to run out of Springfield and neuter Cotton, the Mopac, the Ick. It might be a little bit too powerful to just let him walk away with these both for face. Probably want to contest. So I don't imagine we'll see Billy pull here, and he instead contests the Frisco. Boyd, he's not an uncontested private, so probably not going to be pulling either. He goes on the bridge. This brings us back to Grady, and he also is not on a private where he wouldn't have to fight, so imagine he'll be hoping to disincentivize Blevins specifically. Blevins may pull if he doesn't bid on Southern Cattle. So that's what we see. And Blevins now, we just have a pretty full auction. So imagine he'll go on Gulf Shipping. And does Billy just pull here? He does. Okay. So everybody was just price enforcing, making sure that nobody got a private for face, basically. Now we can look at this in a little more detail. Boyd and Grady are competing for Mississippi Bridge. Boyd also on the Katy, so needs to be a little bit careful that he doesn't overspend here and then be unable to price enforce the Katy. And Grady is on this in the Southern Cattle, and then also the Frisco. So both of these players are on some fairly expensive privates. Don't imagine we'll see this go very high. Maybe someone bids it up once, maybe twice, and then it should go. And Grady wins it. This leaves Boyd hoping to get the Katy, and then Grady still has other options. He may just pass kind of early on some of these more expensive privates, though, which is good news for Billy. So Grady and Blevins, they're up on the Southern Cattle. Blevins also has the Gulf Shipping. I think he probably wants that over Cattle, so may not be eager to bid too high here. And he does, in fact, just pass right away. So it looks like Grady will be leaving with two of the cheaper privates. Don't imagine he's also going to get the Frisco. And this means that Blevins, I think, is really prioritizing leaving with the Gulf Shipping, which Billy is probably happy about to give him because he's going to get the Frisco for fairly cheap here, it looks like. So Billy does bid at least once. Blevins is going up to 100, and he wins it for 100. So far, a pretty standard auction. Billy now, well, let's see. Both of these players, no, Billy only has a cheap private, so he should be ending up with the Frisco here. Grady may bid him up once or twice, but needs to be careful he doesn't overbid in the auction and just get eliminated from the game early if he tries to price enforce. So going up to 170, and Billy wins it. Imagine we'll see a $100 par, which is pretty standard. And we do, and this brings us to the final company in the auction between Boyd and Blevins. Blevins with the Gulf Shipping Company. I almost called it the GMO because I associate those two companies so strongly. And then Boyd with no privates at all. So Boyd should be coming away with the Katie here. And we'll see how well Blevins is going to force him to pay. Up to 190. And this leaves Boyd with priority, so he's not going to lose out on the Katie. Does he actually have the money to float it? It's close. I don't have the numbers memorized very well for this particular title. So 68 times 5. He is $5 short, so he will have to wait until the next stock round to float this, and we may just see him. We'll probably just see him sit on cash as a result. Correction, he's going to at least secure the presidency, but then he may sit on cash. Grady, he has cattle and the bridge. Interesting combo, moderately priced privates, and fairly flexible. So with cattle, you could look to start one of the Western companies and then just neuter the east side of the map with the bridge company. Alternatively, you could take one of the river companies and then lay cattle in close proximity to take advantage of both privates. We'll see what he wants to do here. So he does take cotton. Okay. So he'll be using the bridge to lay Memphis and then I assume laying cattle on Little Rock, and we'll see where he wants to go from there. Cotton, I believe, is heading towards Fort Worth. Is that correct? Yes. So really nice synergy for him, actually. Can just make a beeline west and destinate fairly early. Not even that expensive of track. He'll probably just have a $60 track to lay. So that's pretty strong. I really like that strategy. A good early start for him. Blevins, he is starting the GMO as expected. And then we have the Frisco president, probably just buying shares in other players' companies. Doesn't really need to buy any more of the Frisco if he doesn't want. And he's just going to be sitting on cash, same as Boyd. And as I say that, Boyd actually is not sitting on cash. It looks like a lot of players are auto buying, so it's moving quickly through the stock round. But Boyd is just fully investing in the Katie up front. And we actually go into the operating round because everybody's on auto actions. So let's just look at the game state real quick. Billy ends up with priority, and Boyd is one share away from floating, but does have the cash to do it in the next stock round. Grady and Blevins both floated. So we have a 3-company float, and Billy with the Frisco presidency will end up with priority. Has a decision here, needs to decide whether he wants to head up north towards the Katy or kind of down south towards Little Rock or perhaps even Memphis. Both of them leave him potentially vulnerable to tragic track from another player. He is operating so far ahead of these other companies, particularly the Katy, that it would be safe. He could expect to get into Kansas City, I think, without much difficulty, but probably doesn't want to lay track, especially expensive track with terrain cost for the Katy player. So I'm not really sure what he should do here. We'll see what he decides. And looks like he's heading south and leaving his options open. Could head to Little Rock or even over to Memphis, depending on how this develops. So pretty safe opening here. And we'll see how many trains he buys. One train should be guaranteed, basically, unless he's worried about not breaking into green, in which case he could end up without a run. That said, yeah, because Memphis or Cotton will get an extra track lay, so he could potentially end up without a run if we don't get into green. Buys a single 2 train, not going to be pushing. We'll see what Cotton does, and using his private ability as expected, and then makes a beeline to Little Rock. He does leave the Frisco an opening to get into Memphis, which I assume Billy has to be a little bit grateful for because there's no guarantee that he would ever run, actually. And he buys 2 trains. So he's going to be assuming that Frisco lays track into Memphis for him, and then he'll be able to run both of his trains. He's much less dependent on green than the Frisco player is. GMO down south. He lays double track into southeast, pretty standard. He's going to be laying his port tile on Mobile in the next operating round or as soon as green breaks, and then running for pretty good cash out of double tapping Mobile and the southeast offboard. Expect to see 2 trains for him, which he does, and we're into the stock round. So Billy with priority, he now has the ability to look at whose revenue is going to be highest, and probably doesn't want to buy his own Frisco shares. They're very expensive, and he'll be depleting his own IPO. So he's between the GMO and the cotton player, and it really depends on whether or not you're expecting green to break before these companies operate, um, because then they'll be able to use their privates. Um, their revenue is going to be quite highly dependent on that. GMO in green, I think, will be running for more with the port than cotton will be. But if green doesn't break before the GMO is able to operate, then maybe the cotton's a better investment. So he buys GMO. Boyd buys the last Katie as expected. Grady, no cash. And Blevins, no cash. So we'll see what Billy wants to do here. He's going to be going second to last in priority, even if he doesn't take any action. So might as well just bite the bullet and fully invest here, I think. Buying a cotton. So he's buying one of each now. And going harder on cotton. We'll see. He has enough for another, is it 2 shares? I think it is. And we see cotton float up. So Billy with exactly enough money for efficient investment. Good work for him. Does leave himself open for a dump. Don't know that we need to be overly worried about that. The cotton player has a fairly cheap private, and like we said, the cotton is set up for some pretty good runs here, so it may not make sense to dump cotton so early. Everybody's passing, and this leaves Boyd with priority. Boyd being the Katie player. Frisco first up. I expect he'll be laying towards Memphis, and he does. Runs a single train for 40 and pays that out. He now buys a second 2 train, making it much more likely that we'll be seeing green. And actually, we'll be seeing green even before cotton operates, probably. So both cotton and GMO are going to be running pretty well. Katie, we'll see what he. So this player, I believe he has priority. Didn't we say that? Boyd, yes. So he's in a nice position here. He has the Katie presidency and priority, may be able to take the Santa Fe in the next stock round. These 2 companies have very close. There's just a lot of synergistic track for these 2 companies because they have the same destination in such close starting cities, and they basically have guaranteed access into Kansas City, which is a major revenue location for the map. So really nice synergy if he decides to go that route. Imagine we'll see a 2 and a 3 here, and he does lay the Topeka tile oriented down towards the southwest to get both of his companies headed towards their destination. Buys in his 2 and 3 and has enough money for his private, which he immediately buys in. So he will have the cash to float if he wants to. Cotton, probably upgrading Memphis. He is laying his cattle on Little Rock as expected and upgrades Memphis, running 2 trains for 110. Buys a 3 just so he doesn't fall back trainless. Actually buys 2 3s, okay. So may have to withhold a couple of times as these more expensive trains come out. And did he not have a private to buy in? Oh sorry, he already did. Okay, so he's all set. And then GMO, he's upgrading Mobile and will be buying in his private, I'm sure, to lay the shipping company, running for 140. So does run for a little bit more than cotton. Unfortunate for the Frisco player who invested in the cotton instead of the GMO, but not always clear, exactly how the trains are going to break. So just bad luck for him there. Buys a 3, also buys 2 3s. So cotton and GMO are going to be running fairly hot in the mid game, but are going to be struggling later in the game. May have to withhold into yellow or have a friend bail them out for these more expensive trains. Boyd here, he doesn't have enough cash to float. We'll have to sell Looks like just one sale of the Katy in order to float for minimum. And if you're looking for something, I think you're looking for the Santa Fe, as I discussed earlier. Alternatively, could look towards one of the Western companies like Fort Worth or the Texas Pacific, but I think this is too good of an opportunity to pass up. That's what I'd be looking at. So he sells 2 shares, going to be having a little bit of a higher par as a result, and he pars the Santa Fe for 76. This puts the Katy down into yellow. Good news for him. And he is technically operating ahead of the old companies, the Cotton and GMO. So unless somebody starts to trash shares, he's going to be in a position to rust those 2 trains before they can run. I don't think either of those companies, the Cotton or the GMO, are really in position to run 4 or even 3 trains. Um, so not overly worried about that, but certainly don't want to give them runs that they don't deserve, so to speak. I guess GMO, in theory, could get a second run, or a third run, I should say. I don't think Cotton could. Cotton player's up, and he's buying GMO, highest revenue for the foreseeable future, at least in the first stock round, operating round. Blevins, GMO president, he's buying the Frisco. Important to deplete the Frisco's IPO early in the game if they are allowed to just sit on, 7, 8 shares in the IPO. They don't have to withhold to buy a permanent train. And Billy buying the Katy, cheap yellow share, always attractive. Boyd, he is also depleting the treasury. I don't think either of these players are going to hold on to these shares. I think they're just doing their duty to the table and are going to end up selling out. Grady, he's continuing to invest in the GMO. Blevins, he's actually pressuring the presidency of the Frisco. Billy's going to have to sell a share to defend here. Don't imagine we'll see a dump. So Billy selling out of the Cotton, and Grady is not going to have the cash to defend as a result of investing in the GMO. So bad news for him. And this will give him the cash to defend his Frisco presidency. Interesting that Billy only sold 2 of the shares of the Cotton. Could have sold out fully, but I suppose he still values the revenue. He may be forced to sell piecemeal though, if he isn't careful. Um, in which case he would eat the stock price deficit just like Grady just did. Boyd, he buys another Frisco as well. So both of these players are buying 2 shares, and it's a little bit of a game of chicken in terms of who sells first. Blevins actually sat on 2 shares, so Boyd may be able to hurt both players by selling here, which he does. And Billy's not going to be able to price protect, so Blevins will be getting a stock hit here, but he also will be able to buy a cheap third share and trash the company even more if he wants. Grady, he buys the GMO. That company is now floating up technically. We'll see if that's allowed to hold. Blevins, he buys a Cotton, so not going to be pressuring the Frisco any further. Is he actually going to sit on these shares? That's interesting if he does. I was assuming that he would sell out. So he does sell 1 share, just doing it a little bit out of order. Still can't price protect. And this means that the Frisco will be operating after the Santa Fe. So that's something I didn't think about. This company only has 2 trains. So if the Santa Fe operates first, could easily rust the Frisco's trains. Playing greedy, not buying a 3 train. So that may be what these players were looking for. Actually, it's something I kind of neglected in my analysis. It wasn't just trashing to trash. It was so the company would fall back. So if that's Blevin and Boyd's goal, why would Blevins hold onto a share here? It's not going to be paying out again. Might as well sell both shares. Buy something that's going to be paying. Boyd, probably nothing left for him to do other than float the Santa Fe at this point, which is what he does. Grady, passing Blevins, buying another Cotton. So this company was sold out, but Blevins is able to reap the reward of Billy's pain here and buys the cheap shares that Billy had to sell. So good work to him. Billy could buy a second Katie, but instead is going to be sitting on cash. Boyd will be left afloat, and it looks like everybody else is just passing. So this will leave Grady with priority in the next stock round, and we are into the operating round. Santa Fe first operate, and as noted, very important that he operates ahead of the Frisco here, and he's going to be spending a lot of cash on non-permanent trains, but he's going to hurt the Frisco pretty badly. Upgrades Kansas City for the revenue. Does token it, needs to be careful there that the Frisco president doesn't sneak up there and grab that token. Kansas City does open up to 3 holes, so the tokens are a little bit less valuable than some other cities, but it is a major revenue center and a east-west connector, so still a valuable token. Buys a 3, and I assume buys a 4 here. He does. And we are up to the sad operation of the Frisco without a train. He is heading down south, no surprise there, heading towards his off-board for his destination. And does he token in Memphis? He does. Okay. So needs to secure his routes and is forced to fall on a 4 train. Bad news for him. He actually buys 2 4 trains. Wow, I didn't see that. So he'll have decent runs, but he needs another company to bail this company out now. His 4 run is going to be down into the southeast for sure, as long as he doesn't get tokened out in Mobile, which is a possibility. And then his second 4 run is going to be up to Kansas City. Maybe he tries to run through Topeka into Kansas City, but we'll see where that Katy token ends up. Unfortunately for him, he's put himself in a position where a double track lay from the Cotton player is going to allow them to get a token in Mobile. So may have wanted to lay only 1 track in that direction instead of 2. I don't know. It's hard to say. No guarantee he gets a token in Mobile. That could be bad news for him. GMO. He is looking to bypass Memphis and head up to St. Louis down the road for his own destination. Will have some expensive track to get up there eventually, but he's been token out of Memphis, so he's not going to be able to take advantage of the track that's already been laid for him. Running for 150, which he pays. In the Cotton, does he head down to Mobile? Imagine he does through the port. This track lay, though, is going to prevent him from getting the token there. At least this operation. So instead, maybe heading over to Fort Worth still. So maybe less competition for the token in Mobile than I anticipated. So it looks like he is heading over to Fort Worth and running for 110, which he pays. We're into the Katy operation. Does he head down to Springfield, or does he upgrade Topeka and start heading down south towards his destination? Just the 1 track lay, the upgrade, and he tokens it. So a lot of tokens being dropped in that Kansas City area, which will be secure routes for the rest of the game. Running for just 60, and he actually has to withhold. Looks like he'll be running a yellow strategy on the Katy and just hoping the Santa Fe buoys his net forward for the rest of the game. He's going to pick up his permanent trains using the cash from the withholds in the Katy. GMO, we've had a major change in operating order. GMO now operating first as a result of withholds and falling back trainless. So GMO just making his slow way up north, still running for 150, which he pays. Cotton, still heading towards Fort Worth, does have the $60 he needs for his sole track lay with terrain cost, and making a beeline there. Cotton is run by Grady, who has priority, so he may pick up the Fort Worth just to lay a synergistic track. There are other companies that are attractive, though. I don't know that he needs to pick up the Fort Worth, especially since there's already a token in Memphis. It's not like he's going to be able to snag that token with Fort Worth. May look towards the Mopac. Could also look towards IC. Yeah. So we'll see what he says. He doesn't need to take the Fort Worth just because he's built track for it. Running 2 3 trains just for 110, which he pays out. Santa Fe, he is looking to link up with Springfield, and we'll probably see Katy dropping a token there. Both of his companies have tokens available, I think he needs to be careful that he doesn't leave the map too open for people to cross east-west and get their destinations. So I may see him snag that token. He's buying a 4. Did he buy a train over with the Katy? He did. I missed that. So he had bought a 3 and a 4 last operating round to rust the 2s, and then bought the 4 over into the Katy. So he's running 2 trains with both his companies, but he has very little cash for when permanent trains come out. And we are starting to inch towards those 6s. I expect we'll be seeing probably 1 or 2 companies floating in the next operating round. Could easily see someone blow through those 5s. Let's see. Regardless, running just 1 train for now with the Santa Fe. We'll be running 2 in the next operating round. Frisco, 2 4 trains. Fortunately for him, will not be able to get into Mobile, so no destination for him, and really not a great 4 train run for either of his trains. He links up with Fort Worth and is running for just 150, which he paid. He also only owns 30% of his company, which is really underwhelming. Cotton has been destinated courtesy of the Frisco player, so he is happy about that. Wasn't able to make it on his own, so nice from his opponent to lay that track for him and gets an extra run. He is running for 150, and he does take the token on the map. He's not going to put it on his charter. The Katy is now up and gets a second run from Topeka to Kansas City just to run trains a little more optimally, and is going to finally start heading down towards the southwest. Runs for 140, which he pays. Grady has priority. He's the Cotton president. Don't imagine we'll see him holding these GMO shares. GMO is probably going to be falling back trainless at some point, unless Blevins gets creative. So he is Cotton, and we'll see what other company he's looking to start. Instead of floating a company, he's going to buy a cheap Katy share. So yes, you want the yellow shares, but you're sacrificing a lot by not having your choice of one of the remaining 5 companies. Okay. Blevins, he sells out of the Cotton, and he's going to actually have his choice of companies. So his other company is the GMO. The IC and the GMO are usually a pretty strong combination, but with the way the track has been laid, already tokened out at Memphis, IC is maybe not the most attractive. That said, yeah, it's still probably the right choice. You can run down to Mobile, get the token there, and then cannibalize all the track that GMO has already laid. I think that's the move. So probably see an IC float. Selling the Frisco as well. So he sold the Frisco after he sold the Cotton. He really should have sold Frisco first, because then if Blevins were to price protect the Cotton, he would, if Grady were to price protect the Cotton, Blevins would get a back-to-back action in the stock order. So instead, he's giving Billy the opportunity to price protect second, which means that he will not actually change operating order here, or priority order in the stock round. So a little bit inefficient. Not the end of the world, but he would have gotten a extra move in the stock round, a little bit of extra tempo if he had reversed the order of his sales there. So we'll see if anybody price protects. The Cotton is price protected, and the Frisco is also price protected. So exactly what we talked about. Instead of priority ending up with Blevins, it ends up with Boyd. If he had done that in the opposite order, he would have gotten the ability to buy another share here. Boyd is up, and he is the Katy and Santa Fe president. He doesn't have the cash to float another company. May just be looking to buy paying shares. And if he's looking for paying shares, I suppose the Frisco is the share to buy, which is what he gets. Grady, he neglected to par a company and also price protected the Cotton, owns 80% of it as a result, but he has very little capital and is probably not going to be able to float a company in this stock round as a result. Maybe he was anticipating the sales of the cotton and wanted to make sure he had cash to price protect. That's why he didn't float. Hard to say. Grady buying the Frisco, out of cash for the stock round at this point. Blevins, he's buying the MP. I think I got so caught up in the price protection and priority that I neglected to note which company he actually selected. So he picked the Mopac instead of the IC. And is that just a mistake? Going to be hard for the Mopac to destinate, especially with this Springfield being vulnerable to a token from the Katy Santa Fe. Memphis already tokened out. Mopac is going to potentially have to run all the way down to Mobile and then west. I don't know. I think I like the IC more here. All right. Blevins, he is buying the, oh, we already commented on that, buying the MP. Billy, he buys the Santa Fe. And Boyd out of cash. Grady out of cash. Blevins continue to float. Billy last share for him, and he's passing, so he just wants to make sure that he ends up with priority, it looks like. And the MP has floated. Blevins sells a share of his newly floated company. Going to use that cash for a paying share somewhere else, it looks like. And he buys the Santa Fe. So Billy will end up with priority, and we're into the operating round. Cotton first up, probably just upgrading to green on some of these cities, I'd imagine. And he does upgrade Fort Worth. Okay, so upgrading his destination makes sense. You double the value of that city, so every 10 bucks you get is really 20. He's running for 170 now and pays it out. GMO, still just the 2-3 trains, doesn't have the greatest routes anymore. He's going to start being eclipsed by the other players if he doesn't destinate and get some better trains. Imagine we'll see him just continue to snake his way up north. But again, he made an interesting decision of floating the Mopac instead of the IC. Yeah, I just think the IC would have been a better choice there. I don't know. So he pays train cost and is running for 150, pays it out. He's actually not going to have enough money in the company to lay any more terrain costs. Is going to have the Mopac lay these more expensive tiles. MP is now up, and he's heading down south, so just prioritizing getting his destination run this set as soon as possible. Buys a 4. Does he buy a 5 as well? Buying a 3 across, so giving the GMO money for the terrain. And could actually buy a 5 still, but is going to hold off for now. Santa Fe, upgrading Springfield, and doesn't token it for now. Cotton does have a token available, so I guess he's just waiting to give that token to the Katy. Does the Katy have money for a token? He does not. So could lose out on that token because he didn't drop it with the Santa Fe. Frisco, he is just laying some more tracks so he can run his 4 train, and now has 2 4 runs, I believe. Actually, not quite. Has 1 4 run and a 3 run. Regardless, he is running for 190, which he pays. Still has IPO shares, so making some of that money back into the company, but still nowhere near permanent train money. Katy, he is just looking to hit revenue centers in the short term to maximize his revenue, but eventually he's going to want to bypass probably some of these revenue centers for his destination runs. He's running for 200, has a pretty full treasury, and is halfway to a permanent train. Into the next operating round, Cotton. Is he just going to continue to lay green track, or does he want to get down into Mobile and finally secure that token? He's now a little bit under the gun. Probably doesn't want to lose out on that token to Mopac. So maybe that's worth doing. Instead of laying green, lay down into Mobile. Instead, going to upgrade Little Rock. And he is now running for 220. Pretty good revenue, especially for someone who has 80% of the company. And GMO, probably linking up now. Instead, Not sure about that. Maybe just blocking the Frisco player. Maybe that's why Cotton didn't lay down there. Although if he had token there, that wouldn't have been a valid destination run. Regardless, GMO isn't able to get into St. Louis this turn, but will with the Mopac operation most likely. Runs for just 80 and shuffling trains around into the GMO. Santa Fe has bypassed Memphis and could see a token drop there, which would be pretty bad for Frisco potentially. Not the end of the world, but would kind of hurt its 4 runs for the short term. He instead tokens in Fort Worth. Is an important stop to his destination, but I assumed he was going to be heading there from the west, not through Little Rock. It's still pretty nice. Can destinate potentially a little bit earlier that way. Running for 210, pays it out. Frisco's up, and looks like he is going to be trying to hit the southeast, but he's going to have to do some upgrading to do it. It's going to take him another operation to do it. Running his 4 trains, probably thanking his lucky stars he hasn't been tokened out at Little Rock, and runs for 200, which he pays. Mopac, will we see him link up here? I imagine we will. He does. So GMO now destinated and lays his second track up to Chicago, just developing his routes. Secures the token in Mobile, so bad news for the Frisco. Too little too late with these upgrades. He missed out on the token, and he's going to have to upgrade yet again to bypass Mobile. No guarantees that that's allowed. Running for just 70, but is now the second company to destinate, and takes the token on St. Louis for the double, and is paying out the second time this operating round for 170. Good news for him. Katy, does he just continue to work down the west side of the map? Upgrading Dallas and tokens there. So now has bases for both of his companies just outside his destination, and is going to have to just work for the rest of the game to maintain these routes. He's running for 210, and he withholds, hoping to stay yellow, and getting very close to permanent train money. Did he actually withhold last time as well? Looks like he must have. Yes. So 2 withholds on the Katy. Going to be a little bit cash poor into the next stock round, but looking towards the future. Stock round 5, Billy is up. And he has the second most cash into the stock round, but he is trailing pretty heavily in shares. He has the Frisco presidency, which does have decent revenue and decent map position, but where is his second presidency going to be now? He could look towards the IC. I don't know that he necessarily wants to take the Fort Worth or the Texas Pacific. They are very dependent on the tokens in Little Rock at this point. Otherwise, they're going to have to slowly make their way along the south. Southern Pacific, similar problem. Yeah. Unfortunately, he might have missed his moment for his second company. The way the tokens have come out and the tracks developed, they're all going to have their work cut out for them. He sells out of cotton. Grady may be able to price protect this and end up with 100% of this company. That would be pretty nice for him. And he takes the Fort Worth. Okay. Grady does price protect, so running 100% of the cotton, and he's going to need a second presidency to rescue this company, or else he's going to end up with holding a company he ends up 100% of. But if he can get even one other company to shuffle a train into this, he can run 10 shares for the rest of the game of a pretty good company. So interesting to see how that works out for him. And this changes order, so Boyd is skipped. Blevins is now up, running the GMO and the MP. He does have a fair amount of cash, could look towards a third presidency if he wanted to. But I think probably just looking to bolster his portfolio and invest in the companies with legs is probably smarter. These last remaining companies are not super attractive. So instead buying the Santa Fe, is about to destinate and has pretty good trains. Billy continuing to float the Fort Worth. Boyd, first action for him, I should say, because he was skipped and buying his own Katy. Green share. Grady now selling out of the GMO, and he is doing this unclear to me. I guess he's going to be looking to power company as well. And he takes the TP, okay? And Blevins also price protects, so he's up to 80% of that company out of cash, and he should be pretty close to his cert limit. 3 more shares for him. He is tied with Grady for most shares in the game, but will be falling behind as Grady has a bunch more shares to buy. Billy buying the Fort Worth, so just working on floating his new company. Boyd buying the Green Katie shares. Grady buying his newly floated company, and Blevins passing. So I think we'll just see these two players floating their companies. And the question is, what does Boyd do? So he's buying above his cert limit. Looks like he's going to be leaning into this green strategy. Is he expecting to have priority into the next stock round? He shouldn't be. He's probably going second to last as things stand. And Billy selling his newly floated company to buy Peng share. Doesn't do it just yet. Boyd now maxed out the Katie. This company's going to be floating up now because it's max sold. Always a little inefficient to buy your own company to 100%. It just means more withholds for you down the line. But if he's planning to withhold for permanent trains anyways, I guess it makes sense. And by buying these cheap shares, he's been able to catch up a little bit in share density. So not terrible. Grady, 2 more shares for him. And Billy goes back to buy the Santa Fe, which will also be floating up. He sells the Santa Fe, so going to be trashing that a little bit. And I don't believe we'll be seeing a price protect from Boyd. Boyd is passing. Grady now floated. And he sells just like Billy did. And what is he going to buy? Billy buying the Texas Pacific that was just sold. May just sell it again. Grady buying the Santa Fe that's been sold. Billy passing. And we go into the next stock round. So that leaves Blevins with priority, Blevins being the GMO MP president. And he has money for almost a permanent train, but needs to figure out what to do once this Ford train rusts. Everybody with 2 presidencies here, and Blevins may find himself in a position to run that IC after all, since he has priority. The IC with the GMO and MP could be interesting. Unfortunately, the tokens that he's laid already are going to make it a little bit difficult for the IC to take advantage of this track, but could still engineer a way to do it. Regardless, GMO's up, links up with Chicago, runs his 2 trains for 220, which he pays out. We're into the cotton operation. He is looking to run into Dallas instead of Fort Worth, it looks like. Or I'm not entirely sure what the significance of that track is. And looks like he's paying out as well. Frisco's up. He is upgrading, hoping to eventually get down in the southeast. Blevins has made it quite hard for him with these tokens in Mobile. This is also a track that potentially the IC would want to upgrade through, so maybe he's just hoping to neuter that company before it gets off the ground. Still has 3 shares in the treasury, so even though he doesn't have permanent train money, less likely that he'll be withholding compared to the other players. Also has a redeemed share, which is also paying, so good for him. Pretty healthy company. Running for 210. Pays it out. Santa Fe. Interesting. So instead of just heading down through Wichita and down to the West Coast, actually going to be taking a more central path, it looks like, maybe up through Springfield even, to eventually get down into the Southwest. Running for 210, which he pays. First operation of the Fort Worth. We'll see where he's heading. The track that's been laid for him so far is not very beneficial in terms of his goal of getting up to Denver. The Frisco hasn't really been preparing for that at all. Maybe that was the significance of this track, actually, that the Frisco laid was to help out the Fort Worth player. I don't know. We'll have to see. Looks like he's going to start heading up towards Wichita. Buys the first 5. And it's going to hold at just 1 train for now. Mopac, now with access to Brown, will be appreciating that for the offboard. Potentially we'll see an upgraded Mobile as well, or maybe St. Louis. So it looks like Mobile is the play, running a 3 train, and has to hit the DIT. That's unfortunate. Just 90, which he's withholding, and he does not pick up a train. We're seeing a little bit of a stall here. Texas Pacific's up and upgrades Little Rock, first brown track. Second brown track, sorry, Mobile has already been upgraded. Does have a token. Needs to drop it somewhere, else his runs are going to be cut. Wouldn't be the end of the world to drop it in Little Rock. He's hoping to get down into New Orleans, and that would give him a nice jump across the map if he were to do that. So we do see that track laid. Bad news for the Frisco, whose runs have been pretty boxed in at this point. Frisco does have a token that he could have secured his runs west with, but has just been kind of lackadaisical with it. We'll see where that token ends up. Buys a 3 across from the Cotton. Given the Cotton money, we were talking about how he has 100% of that president and just needs a permanent train. So he apparently is inching his way there. Still not enough money though. And the Texas Pacific also needs a bunch of money for a train. So despite having 10% of his company, he's in a little bit of a rough spot. He's going to have to withhold on both of his companies at some point probably. Katy, still in green, upgrading Topeka, not Kansas City, and runs for 140, which he withholds. So he's in a good shape now. He's got a green company and he's got enough money for a permanent train and 2 4 trains, so not in too much danger. It has cost him quite a bit to do this, though. All these withholds have left him in last place by a good margin. The Frisco player is just ahead of him, but Grady on the Cotton is pulling away. Of course, we've already mentioned that his net worth may be a little bit inflated because he hasn't been preparing for permanent trains very much. Into the next operating round, Blevins on the GMO. He's upgrading St. Louis. Runs for 290. Cotton. He is upgrading his home on Memphis. Running just a single 3 train, but gets 100% of this revenue. So even though it's only $150, if you're getting 100% of it, it's pretty nice. And does he pick up a 5 here? He does. So he's probably really hoping that those 12 trains don't come out and just going to be running a 5 train for the rest of the game for 100% of the revenue. No guarantees the other players let him get away with that. And in fact, with 2 unfloated companies that are going to be floating pretty high, there should be capital in this game to bring out these 12s, especially with the Katy withholding as heavily as it has been. I don't know that you can expect the 12s to be safe for you in this game. Frisco route has been cut at Little Rock as noted, and he's still working away on getting into the southeast. Well, he's taking him some time. Runs for 180, and he pays it out. Santa Fe's up, upgrades Wichita, and is going to be linking up in the west and then slowly heading down to the southwest via Dallas or Fort Worth, I'm sure. Runs for 240, and he pays that out. Fort Worth now does complete the link up and is not too far from hitting Denver, so we'll be destinating pretty soon. He secures a token in Wichita to make sure he doesn't get his runs cut, and runs for just 130, which he pays. Mopac, running just a 3 train, upgrades St. Louis to Brown, and he's withholding. So Blevins, makes sense for him to be withholding. He has no permanent trains and is shortly going to be on the hook for some. Is he anywhere near the yellow phase? He's getting there. It's going to take him a couple more withholds. But with all these players withholding, you got to expect these 12 trains to come out. TP, upgrading Fort Worth, running his 3 train for 130. Also, actually half paying. Okay. And then Katie, does he pick up no, he can't pick up a 5. So just upgrading Dallas and running for 280, which he pays. So actually was able to pay out at least once on his Katie. He's been withholding quite heavily. Still probably in last place. Actually narrowly in third place, but trailing as a result of all his withholds. Has enough cash in the next stock round, though, to take advantage of his yellow strategy. So let's see if Blevins or Billy want to float these last two companies. I think Blevins is looking at the IC with some interest. I don't imagine anybody's too excited for the SOPAC at this point. Let's see. And in terms of share density, Blevins would have to sell some shares in order to float the IC fully, but he may want to just start floating it and hope that the other players buy expensive shares and they can't price protect when he sells. He's technically really only invested in the Santa Fe. Those shares are 110. So Boyd was almost certainly going to have cash to price protect unless he sells very late in the stock round. So he does par the IC. No surprises there. And he sells the Santa Fe, just one share now. I guess he's looking to skip Billy and then just get a leg up in terms of operations. The only downside of that is that if Billy's operating last, or sorry, if Billy goes last in the stock round, you're still just going second to last. So it's not really that big of an advantage to you to skip him. In fact, it may actually hurt you. You may want Billy to be spending all his cash early so that you have a better chance of having Boyd or Grady go last. We do see the price protect, and Grady's up. So he takes the Southern Pacific. Maybe Blevins wanted to skip Billy in order to prevent him from getting the Southern Pacific. Southern Pacific with the Frisco and the Fort Worth. Yeah, I'm not sure. Regardless, Grady takes it. He is the Cotton presidency, so a max par SOPAC is a boon to him, gives him an ability to get some capital for a permanent train, and we have been worried about his ability to afford one of those, so it's a gift to him that he gets a third company. Very unlikely that that was going to happen going fourth into the stock round, but he's able to snag it. Blevins, he is buying the Frisco. I assume we're just going to see him trash a little bit before he goes on to float the IC. Billy, also see him buying the Frisco, so buying his own IPO, unfortunately. Boyd, all these players are buying the Frisco. Imagine one of them is going to be selling out here. Doesn't look like it so far, but Blevins is going to have to if he wants to float that IC. Grady, buying the TP yellow share, so worried about hitting his cert limit, which is a reasonable concern. He's already at 13 shares. Blevins does sell out of the Frisco. This can be price protected without too much trouble. And also selling out of the Santa Fe. So he sold out of the Santa Fe piecemeal. Boyd and Billy can protect here, and that will mean that Blevins gets a leg up in the stock round in terms of buying his new company. So I guess he's just hoping to skip other players and take actions quicker. He's working on floating his IC, and we'll see if these two players price protect. Billy price protects, and Boyd price protects. So he is accelerating his ability to float the IC a little bit, but he's given players the ability to buy above the cert limit of companies that they probably are interested in buying. These early floated companies generally have better track than the later ones, so higher revenue potential for the late game. Grady, he's continuing to float the SP. Blevins buying the IC. Billy, Mopac. Boyd buying a Fort Worth. Okay. Not usually an exciting company, especially when floated late. Grady continuing to float, and Blevins continuing to float. One share left for him to buy. Billy, Fort Worth. One thing I'll point out about this game in general that I don't think I noted in the last video is even though there's 10 companies, the ability to price protect and buy above the president limit, and also the ability for the companies to buy their own shares, means that it can be a struggle to reach your cert limit, even with the extra 2 companies compared to 1830. You know, those 20 extra shares, they end up oftentimes getting tied up in the treasury or in your opponent's portfolios. So you're oftentimes forced to buy, marginal companies just because you have nowhere else to put cash, which is, something that occasionally will catch me by surprise when I'm playing this game. I'll be surprised that I can't buy any good companies because all the shares are unavailable. Boyd, he's buying the TP still. Grady floating the SOPAC and probably seeing the IC float here. We do. Does he sell a share? He's at a cert limit, so could sell and then buy, but he's sold a bunch of shares already, and there's not that much available left for him to buy. Would have to buy the Fort Worth, or I guess he could buy his Missouri Pacific. Maybe see him do that. Sell the IC for the MP. Just passing for now. We see the TP being bought, almost sold out. Grady, last share for the Southern Pacific. Actually, yeah, so he has to sell a GMO to open up space for it. And the GMO is from Blevins, who can't price protect it, so bad news for him. Blevins buying the last yellow TP share, and the Southern Pacific has floated. We'll see if Grady, he still has cash, but may just want to pass here instead of selling the SP. He'll be going second to last in priority, or last in priority, kind of regardless of what he decides here. Looks like everybody's passing. Grady, he does sell an SP, so resigned to going last. What does he buy instead? He bought the Fort Worth. Okay. Everybody's passing. Blevins happy to end up with priority again. And we are in operating round 6. Just looking at the game state. Current leader is Grady. I really like when you're able to own 100% of your company. It just is very gives you a lot of control of that company's fate. It's floating up. You don't have to worry about other players selling. You always run it good because you own 100% of the revenue. It's just a reassuring position to be in. But he does have a fair amount of train liability, and the map position of his next two companies, the TP and the SP, a little bit underwhelming. So he may fall behind later in the game, especially if those 12s come out, which I think we will see. Boyd, on the other hand, he has been running the Santa Fe and the Katy since the early game. Got a good early start in terms of building synergistic track for both of these companies, but hasn't been able to destinate on either one of them just yet, and has been very slow to kind of develop the track. I think he's finally gotten to a point where we'll see him be able to snag a route into the Southwest, but it has taken him a long time to do it. So he may accelerate in his revenue here. He is trailing in shares. Actually, that's not true. He's trailing in certs, but his shares are second most in the game, so he's doing okay. His net worth has struggled because he's been withholding on the Katy so much, but once he's able to start paying out, he may rocket back up in the standings. Billy, Frisco, and the Fort Worth. He has been beat up by the other players a little bit on the Frisco in terms of them trashing his shares. He's been tokened out in some places, still hasn't been able to destinate. No real guarantee that he is able to destinate, and is stuck with the Fort Worth as his other company. This company is going to destinate in this operating round, so a little bit of a glimmer of hope from there, but he might be out. Going to be a 2-share presidency, doesn't have permanent train money in either of his companies. Yeah, he's in rough spot, and his shares are pretty far behind. So Billy unlikely to be winning this game. Strong contender for last place probably. And then Blevins, GMO, MP, and IC. Really like the synergy between those three companies. The eastern edge of the map. He has destinated in just one of his companies, but should be seeing the IC destinate fairly quickly here. Mopac is going to take a while to get towards the west. Do think we'll see that, but it's going to take some doing. And in terms of company money, because he was able to max float the IC, is in a much better position than he was before. So definitely still a contender. I don't know exactly who I favor in this game. Possibly Grady. He's already in the lead, exceeding his share limit by a fair amount. Has decent run potential in the cotton. I worry about these two companies. They may end up not being, a very strong portion of his portfolio. We'll see if the rest are able to carry him across the finish line. Back to the game, Blevins on the GMO probably needs to start looking towards laying track for the IC. And yeah, I'm not sure what the significance of that track is. Running for 370, very nice revenue, and owns 80% of the company, so that's great for him. Cotton, he needs to start laying some track for the Southern Pacific, I believe, unless he wants to try and suitcase that. That doesn't seem very likely to succeed. So I imagine he's just going to lay friendly track for it. Heading down out of Little Rock. We'll have to see where that ends up getting him. Has 2 trains in this company, and it's going to be running for 400, which he gets 100% of. That is monstrous. So if he's able to continue this, he's going to just run away with this game. But I imagine the other players are racing to bring out that 6. A couple of trains away, though, so it's not going to be cheap to do it. Frisco, we've been a little bit dismissive of this company's chances in this game, but he is finally able to destinate, so that's good news for him. Double run for him. He pays out 260 and then 240. Santa Fe is up, and he's heading down south. No surprises there. Not able to destinate just yet, but probably will this operating round after the Katy operates. Well, actually, Katy is tokened out at Fort Worth, so not going to be able to piggyback on these tracks. So we'll take him another operating round probably to get there, depending on what the Southern Pacific does. IC, first operation for him. Where is his track coming from? So he's able to get down into this DIT with an upgrade on J19. So it really needs the brown tight upgrade here, and then his track will be all set for him. And he has basically that track guaranteed because he's going to be operating on the MP, who will be able to get that upgrade for him, no problem. So IC is set up. He buys a 5 and a 3 out of the GMO. So does have to buy, well, actually doesn't buy it against order. So just shuffling cash into the GMO, and the GMO will now have pretty close to permanent train money. Okay. Another player that's probably hoping that the 12s don't come out. Fort Worth upgrading Wichita instead of getting up to Denver. That's interesting. Running for 180. SOPAC first operation. Is he going to link up into Fort Worth and give the destination runaway? Not yet. Actually making it a little bit harder for the Katy and Santa Fe players to get that. Playing a game of keep away with the Southwest offboard. Going to be buying the last 5 here. Can't afford the 6 as well. So instead can be shuffling cash into the TP. Unfortunately for him, unlike Blevins, he was forced to buy a train across operating order, so going to lose a run on that. Maybe expecting the 6 to come out here and rust the 3s though, so maybe that 3 wasn't going to run anyways. Mopac lays the track that we expected for his sister company in the IC, and runs his 3, which he withholds. Last run of the 3s probably. Buys the 6. Nice. All the special tokens, cattle, and the port have gone away. A little bit less revenue for the east side of the map, but going to be worth it to pick up the first permanent train of the game. IC getting a destination run. That's pretty nice, very efficient. First time you operate to be able to destinate. So running for 200, which he pays. Texas Pacific, now trainless. And going to be heading down towards New Orleans. Next operating round should be able to get there, but it's going to have to emergency buy a train. Grady, let's just look at his position here. Has 2 5 trains and is going to have to out of pocket a 6. So that's rough. He really needs the 12 trains not to come out. But with, all these companies sitting on a bunch of cash, really no guarantees that he can rely on that. especially if the KD is continuing to try and stay in the yellow zone. Although he's in a rough position too, just 2 4 trains. When those trains rust, which is going to be happening pretty soon, it looks like he's going to have to emergency buy 2 expensive permanent trains. All right. So he buys the 6, emergency buys it. That's chump change for him, though. He's getting a $400 payout every time the cotton runs, so he can easily afford the $77. Katie, he is looking to get into his destination, but because of the way the SP track has been laid, going to take him an extra operating round to do it. Withholds again. And does he buy a 6 here? He does. Okay, so has secured one of his permanent trains. Still on the hook for a second permanent train and has very little cash. GMO. He has destinated a while ago, so just laying track for his other companies. Runs for 180, pretty underwhelming run, and nowhere near a 8 train. Even with the withhold would be a little bit off, so that's a little bit unfortunate for him. I'm sure he would have liked to bring out the 8 train before anybody else's 4 trains ran, especially since he only has 1 4 train. If he did that, he'd be really punishing Boyd and Billy. Those 2 players have been falling behind. If their 4 trains just rusted without getting a run here, it's probably lights out for them. Might be lights out anyways, but he's going to be a few bucks short even with a withhold from doing that. Cotton, he is upgrading to block the destination runs, I assume. Is there a second brown upgrade for this tile? There is actually 2 more brown upgrades, so not going to be able to prevent the destination run for the KD and Santa Fe player. Running for 240, but again, he gets 100% of that, so pretty good. Frisco, he's going to have to start withholding, I think. I think he just has 2 4 trains, correct? Yes. Oh, no, he does have a 5 train. But still, needs to bring out a permanent train for his other company. He tokens in St. Louis. Not really the end of the world for the IC. Pretty easy to bypass, especially when Blevins has 3 companies operating along this eastern half of the map. But a token in St. Louis is never a bad idea. Pays out 160 and shuffling trains. So is going to be probably bringing out an 8 train in the Fort Worth, it looks like. Yeah, he has the cash to do it. Unfortunately for him, very inefficient way of doing it. Had to buy a train across operating order, and then the Frisco is going to be falling back trainless in the next operating round. So unfortunate, just a little bit inefficient there. Santa Fe, last run of this 4 train, and he is getting that brown upgrade, so he will be hitting his destination and actually doesn't have the long enough train to do it just yet. So bad news for him. And how is that possible? So, oh, because he bought the 6 train across. Okay, so the 4 train wouldn't have been enough, but with the 6 train, he's able to do it. And he puts the token on the map and is going to get an extra run, which is pretty darn good, 370, and he owns 80% of it. Fort Worth, he is upgrading Austin, probably hoping that the KD can get into Austin shortly. Actually, not entirely sure. Maybe just hoping to improve his run a little bit. So just getting a few extra bucks, it looks like. Interesting that he has just been neglecting to lay into Denver. Doubling a 50 value city or even a 40 value city. Worthwhile, but happy to just sit on it. Do we see the 8 train come out here? We do. IC, probably looking to bypass this St. Louis blockade here. Instead, heading over to Kansas City, it looks like. Spending cash to lay this track even. He needs 1, maybe 2 permanent trains still. Interesting that he's doing this. Runs for 200, pays it out. Southern Pacific trainless and is going to inch its way over to New Orleans. Going to take him a while to get there. And where is his permanent train coming from? So he has to contribute a ton of cash. That's going to knock him back a little bit in terms of his lead. Blevins is kind of nipping at his heels here, but he probably just wants to prioritize getting permanent trains early. Does not want to be in a position where these 5 trains rust and he has to buy two 12 trains. So he's kind of future-proofing himself, so to speak. And the Katy needs a permanent train. The Mopac both need a permanent train. So we are nearly at those 12. So I think that's probably the right move. He's still going to maintain his lead here, and he's going to be pretty set for the rest of the game very soon. I'll point out that both of these companies have $0 left in them. So going to be very challenging for him to train shuffle, withhold, that kind of thing, and move trains around. He is going to get a guaranteed run of both of those 5 trains out of the Cotton, though. So even emergency buying the 8 train there, he should have plenty of cash going in the stock round. MP, Lang and Jackson. So upgrading the IC home. This player is just disinterested in bypassing St. Louis. I'm surprised by this. And he out of pockets a 8 train, only has to pay $5 out of pocket, so really not too painful. The Texas Pacific running its 6 train. He is able to get Katy into its destination and runs for $230 but only paying half. And Katy trainless is not able to destinate, but if he out of pockets a permanent train, will have the run now. So even though it falls back trainless, does get at least 1 run before the next operating round. Has a 10 train. That's going to be a pretty monstrous run. Unfortunately for its destination run, not going to be able to take full advantage of the 10 train. So he also puts his token on the offboard and runs for 310. We are in the last operating round of this set, and has everybody met their permanent trains at this point? Not quite. The Frisco still is trainless. We commented on this inefficiency earlier, last operating round. Interestingly, the Texas Pacific has actually bought a 5 train out of the Cotton and is going to be running 2 trains in the Texas Pacific. That we'll have to look at the map, but I imagine that running both the trains out of the Cotton has got to be better, right? You own 100% of this company versus 60% of the Texas Pacific, and the Cotton should have decent runs. So with an upgrade, could run into St. Louis and then down in the southeast with 1 train, and then from Memphis down into Southwest. Yeah. And then the Texas Pacific, I guess he has decent 5 runs for these companies too. Can run a train out of Little Rock up into Kansas City and then a train out of Dallas. Well, hopefully he did the math and then realized that, running the 2 trains out of the Texas Pacific made more sense. Otherwise, I don't fully understand it. Maybe he's hoping to withhold on the Texas Pacific, keep it yellow, keep that revenue, and then shuffle a better train into the Cotton down the road. That could be his strategy and why he shuffled the trains that way. Okay. GMO, still heading west over to Kansas City. Not entirely sure what the plan is here. This Kansas City track will upgrade with a 3rd hole, I think. Yeah. So maybe he wants that token in the GMO. All right. Running a 6 train for 240. Cotton. He is upgrading to New Orleans, probably trying to help his other company out. Does he have a company? Yeah, the Southern Pacific that needs to get there. And running for 260, paying it out. Frisco, going to have to buy his train across operating order, which he does. Santa Fe, upgrading Kansas City, and we'll see who ends up with that token. Running for 320, 80% of that, very nice. Fort Worth, does he finally start heading towards Denver? I can't believe he didn't do that earlier. Must have had other priorities, but boy, doubling your run is pretty attractive. 220, and he actually takes the token on his charter. So not interested in doubling Denver. And where is that token going to end up from the Fort Worth? Not in Wichita. He's already got a token there. Tokened out at Little Rock. Unlikely to get it down in Kansas City. So I guess maybe Jackson? Yeah, not sure. There is a cost to taking that token on your charter. You're reducing your revenue for the rest of the game. If you can leave it in an important pot, it's obviously worthwhile, but it's unclear to me where that's going to end up. IK running a 5 train, looking to bypass Topeka, and it looks like the IK has actually ended up with the token in Kansas City. So right player, wrong company. We thought maybe the GMO was going to do it, but it's actually the IK. Paying for 280, and the SP is up. Is he going to get into New Orleans yet? Not quite. And doesn't actually have the money to lay Baton Rouge, so it's going to be even slower than anticipated. Running an 8 train for a measly 130. That's what I'm talking about with these late companies. You need the cash to rescue your other companies, but you get train liability, and then you end up with a bunch of shares in your portfolio that are pretty bad. Mopac, he is upgrading down, probably opening up New Orleans, it looks like. And he may just shuffle a train around. I don't imagine he wants to out of pocket the 10 here. But on the other hand, maybe he does. It's going to take a ton of cash out of his treasury for the upcoming stock round. But that means that those 12 trains are just waiting in the wings to hurt his competitor Grady. I don't know. I think you got to shuffle here and then hope to bring out the 12s in the next set. Bank is looking tenuous. I guess we could expect the bank to break in the next set if nobody brings out a 12. If he doesn't bring out the 10 here, maybe he won't have an opportunity to prevent the game from ending. There's going to be a little bit more cash coming into the bank with stock purchases, but there's really not a whole lot of shares to buy. Southern Pacific has got some. I guess there's a fair amount. Yeah, so there will be cash going back into the in the bank. He does emergency buy the 10, so only 12s left. Let's just look at that for a second. I know we just were, but Grady's on the hook for a 12 soon, and so will be Billy. Who's going to bring that 12 out? I guess probably Boyd. He's going to be trying to keep the Katie in the yellow zone, so withholding, he's already got $300. He's got no 5 trains to rust, and his leaders do have 5 trains. So maybe he's the player incentivized to make it happen. I don't know that anybody else can in a reasonable time. Let's head into the stock round, and actually we're not quite there yet. Texas Pacific. He is almost into New Orleans and gets there, so we'll be hitting his destination run. He's able to pay out for 230, and he does take the destination bonus with the token, running for just 140, it looks like. Katie, last run in the operating round, and have they destinated? Yes, they destinated earlier. So just looking to, not entirely sure here actually. I suppose just get more revenue centers on his run so it can run from Dallas, Austin, Houston, and then into his destination since it has such a long train. Runs for 440, and he actually withholds it. So yes, we certainly will be seeing that 12 train come out. Into the next stock round, just looking at the game state for a moment. Grady is pulling ahead. He is 1,200 ahead of the closest competitor. He is at his cert limit and actually will not be forced to sell down. There are plenty of yellow shares available for him to buy. Well, actually, he may end up with just one of them. But he will be on the hook for a permanent train in one of his companies. Looks like, which one is it? Looks like the Texas Pacific. So out-of-pocketing that train will drag him back down into contention with Billy and Blevins. But he may be able to survive and just run a good train in the cotton for victory. The cotton getting close to reaching max stock value, but I think that we will not see the bank break here. So if he floats up and then pays out 3 times, he will hit the end of the market before the end of the game. So a little lost efficiency there. GMO in the same position. But yeah, I think that if he's forced to buy the 12 train, he probably is far enough ahead that he can still win this game. Boyd, last place. Actually, not. Yes, last place. He has a bunch of shares that he can still buy. And I think he has met all of his train liability in the Santa Fe and the Katy. He has decent runs, but he's so far behind. I think he's out of contention. Billy, technically second place, closely followed by Blevins. Billy with the Frisco, the Fort Worth, two president player, and is just going to fall behind in share density, I think, even when these better trains come out. The Frisco needs a permanent train, and the Fort Worth has a permanent train. So Billy is also eliminated because when that 12 comes out, he's going to fall even further behind. And then Blevins, GMO, IC, and MP, we'll see what he's able to concoct here. I think that he is probably Grady's closest competitor, and he's still in it. He's 5 shares behind. Grady's net worth is probably misleading. He's probably not quite as far ahead of Blevins as it looks. But Blevins is certainly playing a little bit from behind here. We'll have to look at the map in the next operating rounds to see whose runs are going to be better. Probably the Cotton's run is going to be a little bit worse than, for instance, the MPs, or potentially even the ICs with the token now in Kansas City. So maybe Blevins will be able to eke it out. His big problem here is that he doesn't have enough cash in the stock round to buy up to his cert limit. So Grady's going to be able to maintain his share advantage. So I'm favoring Grady, but I think Blevins is still a contender. I think the other 2 players are eliminated. Blevins buying the Fort Worth. The other thing I should note is that even though people are buying shares and Grady's at a cert limit, the shares that remain are probably not the most lucrative shares. So Grady's portfolio is just more mature and he has better shares, independent of, the number of shares. Billy, he is actually selling out of the Frisco. Didn't anticipate that. Okay. And buying a SP. So that is interesting. I understand why he's doing it. He's anticipating that he'll need to emergency buy a train for the Frisco. But really, this is just, I think, suicide. Selling shares late in the game like this, you're just falling behind in share density. You're still going to have to buy that train. So, yeah, I think he's just a goner. Boyd buying the Fort Worth. Grady, last in operation, but first in our hearts. Probably buying an MP here. He does. Blevins buying an MP. The other players need to make sure to buy these yellow shares so that Grady doesn't get another one. Billy buying the IC, so Grady now guaranteed to get another yellow share. Bad news. IC looks attractive, but no guarantee that 5 train runs again. Boyd doing duty and buying the MP, so Grady's able to buy 2 of these shares because Billy is not paying attention, it looks like. Blevins is passing. Is he at his cert limit? Not quite. Surprised to see him passing there. There are shares to buy still. Even buying the Southern Pacific would be worthwhile. Can't buy his own IC, which is probably what he'd want, but maybe he's hoping someone sells and he can price protect. Billy, as he's sold out of the Frisco, has a ton of shares to buy, so we'll be seeing him buy up the rest of these shares, it looks like. Boyd, he is buying the IC, and Grady's at his share limit. Is there anything he wants to sell in order to pick up that last IC? I don't remember the routes well enough to know, but he may do some stock portfolio optimization here. Passing, Blevins continuing to pass. Billy, now the IC is sold out. Boyd, buying a Frisco. I think I misinterpreted this Frisco play. So there was actually a dump there that I missed. Um, so Billy had dumped this on Boyd. Okay, well that makes it a little bit of a better decision. Um, but unfortunately, I think this is just a crabs in a bucket situation. Billy and Boyd are competing for last place, I think. Um, so I don't think that changes the overall outcome of this game, but it makes a lot more sense for Billy to sell it. I missed that there was a change in presidency. I thought that Billy had just sold down to 20% of the shares. So I retract my earlier criticism. Billy paying shares still, and Boyd, probably last share for him, so realizes he's going to be running the Frisco, might as well make the best of it. Not able to reach his cert limit, but has 26 shares, so second most in the game. Grady. I think he was passing earlier, but now is going back to optimize his portfolio. Since Boyd has bought some shares off the market, gives Grady the opportunity to sell out of it and buy a Peng share, which he buys in the GMO. GMO, very expensive share, but the share appreciation in the upper right hand of the market is such that it makes sense to buy that late in the game if you have the cash. Blevins passing, and Billy continuing to buy Peng shares, having to buy these shares at quite a steep deficit. So it's going to take this company a run or two to even break even. Boyd passing, Grady passing, Blevins. He has been passing for a while, but he actually is going back to buy shares now. Lost an opportunity to buy, without potentially losing priority earlier. But I think it's safe to assume that Billy's going to continue buying shares up to his cert limit. SP is now floating up, and Billy's last action is to pass. So I don't think he actually met his cert limit. Did he? He did. Okay. So let's just look here for a moment at priority and see if there's any opportunity for dumps that could be a last minute game state changer. Because I think for right now we are favoring Grady than Blevins, but probably pretty strongly favoring Grady. He is potentially open to a dump on the MP, but the MP is operating behind him, and it's also the last company in that player's presidency in terms of operating order, so should be a safe investment. So nobody's going to be dumping on Grady. He has the opportunity to dump on Billy and Boyd. Boyd has priority on him, so won't see that probably. And as a result, I don't think anybody's going to be able to really catch up to Grady. Blevins, he has no dumpable, he can't be dumped upon, so no worries for him. And then Billy, since he has a one presidency, in order to reach his cert limit, he has multiple dump opportunities, and he's going last in priority. So may find himself in a situation where someone is able to dump a company back on him. Doesn't look like it will be Boyd, and I don't think the other two players are incentivized to do it. So probably no more dumps, but we did see one this game. GMO's up. It's running a 6 train. Let me scroll to the actions. And this may be the GMO's run for the rest of the game. Pretty good run. Probably would like to bypass this DIT somehow, but doesn't seem like it's going to be easily accomplished. And is able to hit his St. Louis destination for double the revenue. So 240 pays it out. Cotton. That 5 train is not going to be lasting very long. But he's going to have a pretty monstrous run this time. 450 pays it out. Santa Fe running his 6 train, and he's not laying any tracks, so he feels his run is pretty optimized. Running for 320, which he pays. Fort Worth, long train in the Fort Worth. Really not the best track to take advantage of it. And he is trying to remedy that by heading east. Let's see what his run looks like. So he is not bothering to try and hit his destination. instead just hitting higher revenue centers. But in order to do this, hitting 2 DITs, so really not an impressive run for the Fort Worth. Makes sense that he didn't take his token on his destination, though, if he's not even going to be hitting it. Paying out for 240. And as a result of this track, we see the final 2 destination runs in the game. The SOPAC, and he takes the bonus, running for 210. And then the MOPAC is also taking the bonus, and his run should be pretty strong. Just 290 for now, but he has pretty good access across the map. IC running 2 trains, also a company with pretty good access around the map. Running for 520, very good. The Frisco, probably the only run that this 5 train will be getting. I assume we'll be seeing the 12 come out in the Katy. He's pretty darn close. We'll see if he's able to secure that 12 this time or not. Although it's the same player, so we'll see if he actually wants to bring out the 12 or not now. That changes things, actually, that dump. Looks like he probably is anticipating the 12 come out as he's withholding. May buy a train across from the Katy and bring the 12 out into the Katy. Looks like he is going to do that. Katy with a 12. Pretty good. He has a good run there from Chicago through Kansas City, Topeka, and then down into the Southwest. So pretty good run for him. Makes sense. SP is upgrading its destination in New Orleans, and it looks like he's going to be doubling that, so perfect. Makes sense there. Running for 250, which he pays. Mopac, it's another company that should have a pretty good run. Upgrading Baton Rouge and running east to west. So going to be able to hit his bonus and pays, actually withholds for 350. Why is he withholding Blevins? He has permanent trains. I guess just withholding because he's expecting the bank not to break and wants to stay yellow. If we see the 12s come out, that's going to force another $2,200 in the bank. So I think that's safe to assume. Yeah, the bank probably will not break, so doesn't want to exceed his cert limit just yet. TP, he is just upgrading DITs, probably hoping to eventually increase his run. Running for 250 and also withholding. Again, I think this player wants to stay yellow. And then Katy should be bringing out the 12 train here, and does. So we'll see one more 12 train come out from, who is it? From Grady. But he is so far ahead, even the out-of-pocket $600 for that train should not be changing the outcome here. And if we just look at the revenue for a moment, he was leading. Granted, some of the players were withholding. So that may not be an accurate indication, but it's going to take a lot for these other players to catch up. I think he's got this game wrapped up. Let's go through the rest of this operating round, and then I think we can probably skip through most of the stock round in the next set of operating rounds. But let's see how this develops. GMO, he is laying track down here and running the same 6 route, probably his route for the rest of the game. Cotton has lost that 5 train. May see him shuffle trains to run the 12 in the Cotton. He does have pretty good access up into Kansas City and then down into the Southwest. Potentially could even run down into New Orleans. I don't know why I pronounced it that way, New Orleans. So definitely could take advantage of a 12 train in this Cotton Company. Not unreasonable to see that. Would lose a run potentially, but I think we already determined that he was going to be hitting the max of the stock market inefficiently. So losing a run if you ultimately max out is really not a deficit at all. Runs his 6 train for 270, pays it out. Santa Fe, I don't know that these track upgrades matter that much at this point. Running for 320, pays it out. Fort Worth with an 8 train. I may be missing some subtle decision making on these track lays, but the game is entering the twilight, so I don't want to focus on that. Ick, running for 300, pays out. Sopak, still upgrades around New Orleans occurring. Runs for 270, pays it. And the Frisco, now with a shiny new 10 train, probably will have decent revenue. 330, and he's withholding. Is he looking for a second permanent train? I don't think he's going to be able to come back with that. Mopac, running for 380. And half paying. So I think he is just trying to stay yellow. I think that's what we're seeing here is multiple players trying to just maintain their share lead. Texas Pacific does have to buy a permanent train here. Buys the 12 and back to the Katy all the way in brown. So it's going to be able to probably pay out for the rest of the game here. Even another payout will leave him in green, and we expect the bank to break in the next set. Last set of this operating round, and just looking at the map, I don't think that, I mean, we see a lot of brown upgrades down here. I haven't really paid too much attention to that. Maybe I should have been. But I don't think we have a whole lot of interesting decisions left in the game. GMO has a token. Fort Worth has a token. Mopac has a token. Southern Pacific has 2 tokens. Do these tokens matter? I don't think that they do. A token in Jackson could potentially be problematic, but I think anybody that would run through Jackson could also run through New Orleans. So yeah, I don't think there's interesting tokens. And Grady, despite having to fall on a permanent train here, is still comfortably in the lead. May want to shuffle this train against operating order into the cotton so he can take full advantage of it. And that would also help the Texas Pacific stay yellow. So may see that. I think in the interest of time, we're just going to skip this operating round, look at the spreadsheet to see who's running for what. Grady, interestingly, only able to run for 19 there. He must have withheld multiple times. So the Cotton ran for 290. And then he had no run in the Southern Pacific. Did he shuffle trains? He did. He has 2 trains in the Cotton as a result. And he has actually bought a 12 train into the Southern Pacific, so he is running 2 trains out of the Cotton, but that's why his revenue was so bad in that operating round. And then Texas Pacific maintained its 12 train. As a result of this, the other players have really narrowed their lead, and Blevins was actually able to exceed him. I think Grady is just kind of styling on people with this. He doesn't really need those 2 trains to win the game, I don't think. Boyd also running 2 trains in the Santa Fe will have a pretty nice revenue in that company, but he was so far behind, I don't think that Grady needed to be worried about him catching up to him. I think he could have just paid out to win. Okay. And it looks like nobody is above their cert limit. And Boyd, there's 3 players that have shares to buy. The shares that are available are the Frisco, and that's it. So should be a fast stock round. People just, looks like Boyd will pick up 2 shares of the Frisco, everybody else will get 1. And if you're Grady, I think you're happy that it's Boyd that's picking up 2 shares. The other 2 players are much closer to you. So Grady, just optimizing his portfolio a little bit, sells the GMO, and instead we'll pick up a Frisco, it looks like. GMO with just a 6 train, and also going to be hitting the edge of the board here, reasonable to make that change. Plus, potentially hurting Blevins' portfolio or net worth, although Blevins can pretty easily price protect there, so you're giving him an extra share that he wouldn't otherwise get by doing this. That may be costly. So buys the Frisco, and Grady. So Blevins does price protect, okay. Does that cost him a share in the Frisco? I think it does. Okay, so you're only giving him one share. He basically exchanged a opportunity to buy the Frisco for the GMO. That may actually be a mistake on Blevins' part, not Grady's. The Frisco with the 12 train probably going to be running more, and if the GMO runs up against the end of the market, not going to have any stock appreciation, whereas the Frisco is going to be floating up and then paying out 3 times. So we'll have, what is that, $40 of stock appreciation in addition to its higher revenue, whereas the GMO is just going to have $50 of stock appreciation. All right, so that is probably a mistake from Blevins to price protect there instead of buying the Frisco. Granted, it changes because it does hurt him quite significantly to take a drop on a company that he owns 80% of. So I don't know, not something that I can just stall my way through. I would have to do the math to see what made sense there. Billy probably buying the Frisco does, and that leaves Boyd to buy the second Frisco. I think everybody else just passes here. And we're into the last set of operating rounds. Because the track is becoming boring, I think we'll just go through and see who wins. Let's look at the spreadsheet here. Blevins technically in the lead, had a little bit better of stock bumps, so has actually extended his lead on Grady, but it's pretty narrow. Grady has 3 shares on him. Grady actually doesn't end up with the most shares in the game. Boyd does, but Boyd is in a distant last place in terms of net worth, and is running 2 trains in the Santa Fe. I don't believe that'll be enough to overcome Grady. I think Grady still has this, but it will be kind of close. So let's skip through this stock round and just look at the revenue for the players. Grady far and ahead Blevins, so has regained his lead. Boyd technically highest revenue in the game, but has such a deficit, he's not going to be able to catch up to Grady or Blevins. So let's skip to the end, and I think we will be congratulating Grady here. Was able to take the 100% of the cotton for the win. So Grady does win. He is about $700 ahead of Boyd, a pretty narrow margin of victory, given that the net worth is $11,000. Blevins in third and Billy in last place. I think we were expecting Billy to be in last place, and fairly comfortably so. Boyd, which player was this? So he was actually able to leapfrog Blevins and ends up in a second place, just narrowly behind Grady. All right. So well played to these players. Was a interesting game in the beginning and kind of slowed down in operating round 7, I would say, which is not atypical for mini 18xx in the late game. But always fun to see the price protection mechanism in play and some of the unique features of 1870. We will do this game again in the future. It's just a little bit of a longer one, so it might be a little bit of time before we bring it back. Congratulations to the players, well played, and thanks for watching.